Hi, guys. Today you are going to see a screencast on the Constitutional Convention. So, this is kind of going to serve a bit like a video lecture, just kind of in a different format. So, just like a normal lecture where it would have bullet points, you're going to put those same bullet points into your notes. So, let's go ahead and start on the Constitutional Convention. So, you did this activity a little bit yesterday about being a delegate and kind of running into some situations where you have to make a decision. So I thought I might talk about that a little bit more in detail today before I set you loose actually on the document itself. So our essential question is, how is the Constitution developed? So the first point I want to address here is this point called a series of proposals to the delegates. So what does that mean? Well, you saw a little bit in your activity that the way that the Constitution is developed is it wasn't just written from like the very beginning to the end. In fact, people propose plans or make these suggestions about things they'd like to see in the Constitution. And so those happen by delegates that are there, these representatives that are sent, and they propose ideas. And then those ideas get discussed and debated, and then a vote is taken, and then they move on to the next idea. So we're going to start actually by discussing the first proposal, and that's called the Virginia Plan. So the Virginia Plan was written by James Madison, and I mentioned him in class yesterday. It's actually debated for several weeks, from the end of May through the middle of June. And what the Virginia Plan sought out was for a strong national government, something very different from what existed under the Articles of Confederation. The Virginia Plan sought proportional representation. What that means, proportional representation, is that the population in a given state would have a representative sent to government. We call it a republic. A republic is a form of government where the people get to send a representative to the national government to represent them. Think of it a little bit like Patrick Henry's want of actual representation versus virtual representation. So, for a certain population, say 30,000 people, for 30,000 people, you get one representative from their area to Congress. So this is sort of what James Madison wanted under the Virginia Plan, which would mean, by the way, that states that had the largest populations would get more representatives sent to Congress. So immediately, Delaware is frustrated because they feel like they're going to be totally diminished. And in fact, Delaware was really close to walking out of the meeting. One representative, in fact, suggests that, hey, if we're going to do this, let's just abolish all state governments completely. And many of the representatives or delegates at this meeting were not interested in doing that, of course. But Virginia has a point, right? They're a very large state. They have a large population. They believe that they deserve more representation in Congress because of their large population. So also part of the Virginia Plan and the debate is this suggestion that there be one executive, today what we call the president. So James Madison throws this idea out there that there be a president. And immediately people respond in frustration because, as you can imagine, we just left a government that had one person in charge as the monarch. And so folks believe that this idea of Madison's is a little reminiscent of the monarch. So what's funny about all of this, in fact, is that that national executive idea gets really heavily debated and people do not like it. So Alexander Hamilton, who we'll spend some more time talking about, Alexander Hamilton, who has James Madison's back, like he and Madison are on the same page. But Hamilton decides to throw out this idea, and he knows it's sort of a crazy idea, but he does it because sometimes if you throw a crazy idea, it makes another one look better, and Hamilton knows this strategy. So Hamilton says, listen, one executive, why not have three presidents? That'll be perfect. And he knows it's not perfect. He knows it's ridiculous, but the intent is to make Madison's idea look sane. So, in fact, that's exactly what it does. People rise up on Hamilton and say, oh my gosh, that's awful. And I have the debate minutes if you ever want to look at them. But folks talk about Hamilton like he's just such a fool. And he just takes the abuse because his point is made. And he got what Madison wanted, which was agreement that there should be an executive. What else gets discussed? Well, in the Virginia plan, the powers of Congress are discussed and debated, and they're pretty much solidified under the Virginia plan, which you'll be reading about a little bit more soon. So that plan gets discussed, and anything that's voted on and is approved is like set off to the side. So they're going to put that into this larger document we know as the Constitution. Then another plan is offered, and it's called the New Jersey Plan. And this is proposed by a man by the name of William Patterson on June 14th. And Patterson is from New Jersey. And New Jersey, including Patterson, right, is really worried that these large states are going to push pretty heavily. And he's also really worried that those that are federalists, or what we call people who support a strong national government, are going to dominate and try to destroy state governments. So he felt like the Federalists, these folks that like strong central government, were going to try to actually do away with the idea of a confederation. In fact, while the New Jersey plan is being discussed, Alexander Hamilton interrupts the debate and really pushes hard to have a strong central government. Alexander Hamilton is what we call a Federalist. And so ultimately, the New Jersey plan continues to get discussed, and Patterson throws out this idea. He says, okay, fine. You are suggesting that our Congress have representatives from each state, and the number of reps that a state gets is based on its population. But New Jersey doesn't like that. And he says, listen, what should occur is that every state gets the same amount of representatives. So no matter if you're really big and you're Virginia or you're smaller and you're New Jersey, you should get the same amount of representatives to Congress. And so that's discussed for quite a while. And ultimately, Connecticut, as you see in my next bullet point, throws out this idea and suggests, you know what we should do? Why don't we compromise on the two? And it's called the Connecticut Compromise, or sometimes called the Great Compromise. And Connecticut suggests that you could do both. That you could have the parts of the Virginia plan and parts of the New Jersey plan. So this idea that every state have the number of representatives based on the size of your population ends up becoming the House of Representatives. It's why some states like California get 52 representatives to Congress, to the House of Reps, and some states like Idaho get 2. And then the New Jersey plan is added in so that it creates what we know today as the Senate. The Senate is a place that has equal representation. So Idaho gets 2 senators and California gets 2 senators, regardless of the size of their state, how many people live there. So these two are merged together, and it creates a 2-housed Congress, or what we call bicameral, which means 2 houses. And it is agreed upon through the Great Compromise that all bills dealing with taxes and the establishment of taxes must originate in the House of Representatives, since it is directly elected by the people. But this also creates this next issue we're going to talk about, what I call the sticky issues, and that has to do with representation. So I just told you, right, we're going to count the population. Under the Virginia plan, we're going to count the population to determine how many reps a state gets to the House of Representatives. Well, here's the thing. How do we decide who gets to count? Meaning, like, do we count women? Do we count women and men? Do we count slaves? And if we count slaves, are we saying that they're equal to that of a non-slaved or enslaved person? And if we're saying that a slave is equal to a non-enslaved person or someone who's free, then aren't we really saying that both are free, or that they're both people? And if we're saying that they're both people, then aren't we really saying that slavery is a problem, because then we're enslaving people versus property? So this is like a seriously slippery slope, guys. And certainly southern states wanted to have a larger population because they were worried that Congress would try to get rid of slavery. So it behooves